Hi, my name's Lealia, and I used to think silence would protect me. Last week, I walked into a bank I helped build and got treated like I was there to clean the floors. My own sister ripped up my withdrawal slip, live streamed me being searched like a criminal. She called me a fake, a beggar. But the truth? The truth had been buried for years, under family favors, old secrets, and a name no one wanted to remember. Mine. They thought I wouldn't speak, so why now? Why today? That's what I'm about to tell you. Would you have stayed quiet? It's Tate, I corrected quietly. Lealia Tate. The teller blinked once, unmoved. Her manicured fingers hovered above the keyboard as if the wrong pronunciation had drained her interest completely. I could feel the weight of eyes behind me, people shifting in line, glancing down at their watches, annoyed that I dared to slow down their very important mornings. The air inside Regent Crest always smelled the same, a mix of high-gloss wood polish and something expensive trying to smell effortless. I had stood in this very lobby years ago when it opened. Back then, they served champagne at the ribbon cutting. I remembered clinking glasses in the same spot I was now standing. Only no one offered me a drink today. No one offered me anything. I adjusted the strap of my tote bag on my shoulder and placed the withdrawal slip on the counter. $400. Not $4,000. Not $40,000. Just enough to pay the electrician who'd agreed to take cash. That, apparently, made me someone worth dismissing. A security guard near the entrance gave me another glance. I recognized the posture, ready to step in case things got out of hand. But I wasn't making a scene. I wasn't raising my voice. I wasn't even asking for anything more than what was already mine. Is there a problem? I asked, keeping my tone level. The teller pursed her lips. This amount? It's a bit outside our usual threshold for this counter. For small withdrawals, we typically direct clients to the outside ATM. I would, I said, but it's out of service, and I'm already here. The conversation should have ended there. But instead, I heard the unmistakable sound of stilettos on marble. The sharp, deliberate rhythm of someone who wanted their presence felt before they spoke. I didn't turn to look. I didn't have to. Lealia, a voice called. Is that you? I looked up. There she was, Darla. My sister. She was dressed like the job came with a stylist, deep blue blazer tailored to perfection, her name badge gleaming beneath the Regent Crest insignia. Her hair, always too perfectly ironed, curled under at her jawline like a corporate signature. I didn't recognize you, she said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Didn't realize we'd started allowing comfortable clothes in the executive wing? The words weren't loud, but they were loud enough. One of the men behind me chuckled, that quiet, chesty kind of laugh that doesn't need volume to be cruel. I didn't bite. Just here to withdraw some cash, I said, my voice still calm. Nothing more. Darla tilted her head like she was trying to remember who I was, beyond the sibling she hadn't spoken to in months. Maybe years. I wasn't sure anymore. Family time had become more of a PR performance than a genuine tradition. Of course, she said sweetly. But do keep in mind, this branch primarily handles high-value clients. You may find our downtown location more accommodating. It was a brush-off disguised as advice. She didn't say I didn't belong here. She implied it. Like always. I glanced over her shoulder. The teller still hadn't moved. I've had an account here for over 10 years, I said. I helped open this branch. I'd like to make my withdrawal here. Darla blinked. For a moment, just a flicker, something in her expression shifted. But it vanished just as fast, replaced with the same tight, poised smile. We'll see what we can do, she said. She turned and walked away, her heels punctuating the silence. I stood there, surrounded by polished surfaces and artificial kindness, wondering how many people had just watched that entire exchange and assumed I was in the wrong. Maybe that I'd wandered into the wrong bank. Maybe that I was someone who didn't understand how places like this worked. They weren't entirely wrong. This place didn't work the way it used to. My eyes wandered to the etched marble wall behind the teller stations. The mission statement was still there, carved in gold lettering I once argued should be understated, not ostentatious. I lost that debate. Funny how much you lose when you're the one doing all the building behind the scenes. A client in line behind me whispered just loud enough for it to sting. "Why is she even here?" I looked down at my shoes. The left lace was frayed, just enough to notice, just enough to judge. From behind the counter, the teller's voice rang out with exaggerated sweetness. "Miss Tate? Is that how you pronounce it?" I lifted my head slowly. "It's Tate," I corrected. "Lealia Tate." I kept my eyes on her back. Because I knew, soon enough, they'd all see who the real imposter was. The teller cleared her throat, forcing a practiced smile. "Whenever you're ready, ma'am," she said, reaching out with just 2 fingers, like I was handing her something contagious. I handed over the slip. The corner was creased from being inside my palm too long. She looked at it, glanced toward the back office window, and her eyes lit up with recognition. Of course! Darla hadn't gone far. Seconds later, I heard the familiar sharp taps of her heels that always hit the ground like she was walking on someone else's time. She emerged from the hallway with a look that said she wasn't here to help me. She didn't ask. She didn't speak. She just took the withdrawal slip straight from the teller's hand. Then, without flinching, she tore it in two. The sound cut through the lobby like glass splitting in slow motion. "We don't waste resources on pocket change," she said loud enough for everyone in the line to hear. My mouth didn't open, but something in my chest cracked. There was a pause, just long enough for the laughter to begin. Not loud, not obnoxious, just the low, rolling kind that spreads through a room when people think they've been given permission to mock. It came from behind me first, then from 2 men near the espresso station, then from a woman scrolling on her phone. I looked straight ahead. Darla leaned on the counter with both hands, the way she used to lean on the kitchen table when we were kids, and she wanted to prove a point without yelling. "Honestly," she said with a forced chuckle, "I thought this was a prank. You showing up here like this." I said nothing. "You used to have standards," she added, her eyes scanning my outfit like it was evidence in a trial. I tilted my head slightly. "I still do." The words came out steady but quiet. She narrowed her eyes. "You thought this was still your bank?" "I thought it was," I answered. "I thought family might mean something in this building." "That's cute," she said, voice clipped. "But here, you're just another face at the wrong counter." Behind me, I heard a voice I didn't recognize. "Someone go get her a mop," a man said, half laughing. "Looks like she came in through the service door." That one got a full chorus of laughter. I didn't flinch. Darla looked pleased. That was always her favorite game, humiliation dressed as professionalism. From the corner of the room, a different sound rose, a quick electronic ding. Not from the bank's system. A phone. I turned just enough to see Monette Claiborne, one of Darla's longtime socialites, holding her iPhone up like it was an award. She was already live. TikTok, probably. Maybe Instagram. I couldn't keep up anymore. "Oh, this is gold," Monette whispered, panning the camera. She just tried to withdraw $400 at Regent Crest in a tote bag. She said it with the same tone someone might use if they spotted a stray dog trying to enter a steakhouse. Then she laughed. High-pitched, rehearsed, just loud enough to be heard across the lobby. "Ever seen a bank beggar? Today might be your lucky day, y'all," she said to her audience of followers. I glanced at her for a second, long enough for our eyes to meet. Long enough for her to know I heard. Then I turned back to the counter. I didn't speak. I didn't run. And I sure as hell didn't perform. Across the desk, the teller now looked like she didn't want to be involved anymore. Her fingers hovered, waiting for someone else to decide what happened next. That's when Darla leaned in again. "You used to be somebody, Lealia," she whispered, venom hidden in sisterly concern. "But now..." You come in here looking like a checkout clerk from a gas station, begging for walking around money. I stayed still. Is that really what you've become? I looked her dead in the eyes. I became exactly what I needed to be when nobody else showed up. Her face froze for a moment, just a flicker. But she recovered quickly. You don't belong here, she said flatly. My hand rested on the counter. I could feel the wood grain under my fingertips. I helped choose that wood. Imported walnut, sustainable, matte finish. But no one here knew that, not anymore. I scanned the room. The tile beneath me? I helped approve the floor plan. The layout? I suggested 3 versions before they settled on this one. Every inch of this place still carried echoes of my work. But no one saw it. No one remembered. Except for one face behind the teller row. Clara. Young, unsure, but observant. Her eyes met mine. Not pity, not disgust. Just confusion, recognition. A question she didn't know how to ask. I didn't smile, but I held her gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Manette's phone dinged again. Notifications, comments, emojis I didn't want to imagine. Darla turned to walk away, but not before tossing out one last blow. This bank doesn't serve imposters, she said, her voice echoing against the marble. I let my eyes fall shut, just for a moment. I didn't need to scream, but I did grip the edge of the counter just a little tighter. Because once the whole room agrees you're worthless, you start wondering if they're right. That thought lingered, heavy and loud, even as the room around me grew noisier. I didn't move. I didn't respond. But I noticed. I noticed how people shifted their weight, how laughter came too easily, how glances grew bolder the longer I stood there. It started with one woman, a tall redhead in a fitted red dress. She tilted her head and looked me over like I was a scratch on her Lexus. Honestly, she said to no one and everyone, she could have come straight from the bus stop. The man beside her, older, with a Rolex he kept adjusting like it was choking him, added, "She's dressed like she's here to clean." A third voice, higher, smug, whispered just loud enough. "Should we give her a donation jar? Might cover the ATM fee?" The laughter that followed didn't erupt. It dripped, steady, mean, familiar. It was the kind of laugh you hear in school hallways, the kind that stings not because it's loud, but because it's shared. I could feel the flush rising in my neck, but I didn't turn. I didn't make a scene. I stayed right where I was, hands relaxed at my sides, fingers loose, even though everything in me was curled tight. Darla stood off to the side, pretending to read something on her tablet, but her eyes kept darting up, just enough to enjoy the show. Monette had moved to the center of the lobby now, phone angled perfectly for lighting. "Look at the shoes," she said with a grin, zooming in. "Designer look brought to you by Goodwill." Her voice was syrupy, but her words were nails. I didn't have to see her screen to know her feed was buzzing. These days, cruelty came wrapped in hashtags and comments. Then I heard it, sharp and real. "Seriously," a young guy with a Bluetooth earpiece called out. "Can anyone even confirm she's not scamming?" He wasn't asking a question. He was planting a flag. Darla finally looked up, made eye contact with me. "You've created quite a scene, Lilia," she said, smoothing her jacket. "Please don't embarrass our family any more than you already have." I stared at her. "Our family?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "That's rich." She held my gaze for a second, long enough for her cheeks to twitch, but not long enough for her to speak again. Instead, she gave a quick nod to the front desk. One of the younger tellers picked up a receiver. She didn't say much. Just a few clipped phrases, followed by a pause and a final, "Yes, ma'am." That was all it took. A low beep echoed through the security system. It wasn't loud, just a soft signal. But I caught the way one guard straightened, touched the cord on his earpiece, and murmured something into his lapel. Vince, the older security guard, shifted uneasily by the door. He looked at me, eyes hesitant, jaw tight, but didn't move. The other guard, a younger guy, stockier, with something to prove, made his way toward me. His posture told the story before his mouth did. "Ma'am," he said, standing too close, "we just need to do a quick safety check." I tilted my head. Safety from what? "Policy," he answered. "Standard procedure." That wasn't true. There was no policy for what they were doing. No policy for humiliating someone while smiling for the cameras. But I didn't argue. He didn't touch me, yet. But the implication hung in the air. The crowd was quiet now. Not because they were ashamed. Because they were entertained. You could hear the energy shift, like watching a reality show unfold in real time. I wasn't a person to them. I was content. 10 minutes passed like that. I could feel every second digging into my skin. Then the doors opened. 2 officers walked in, uniformed, calm, and utterly disinterested in the tension they'd just stepped into. No one flinched. In fact, a few people clapped quietly, like their favorite contestant had just made it to the next round. One officer approached me. His partner spoke with the front desk. "Ma'am," he said, "can I see some ID?" I handed it to him without a word. "You matched a vague description we were sent," he said, reading the license. "You're not in trouble. We just need you to cooperate." Darla was standing behind the teller counter now, arms crossed. The corners of her lips twitched, but she wasn't smiling. Not quite. I looked at the officer. "Am I being accused of something?" "Not officially," he said, "but someone flagged suspicious behavior." Of course they did. Suspicious behavior like standing still, like wearing shoes without labels, like being inconvenient to look at. He returned the license. "You're clear." But the damage had already taken hold. Phones were still up. Monette was whispering into her mic, and I had no doubt that whatever came next would be clipped, captioned, and spun into a 30-second takedown of the day's bank drama. I breathed in. Slow, shallow. From somewhere behind me, a voice said, "Even if she's rich, she'll always be trash in that outfit." That one, more than the others, landed. Because it wasn't meant to be funny. It was meant to be final. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. But the last part? That stayed with me longer than I want to admit. She wasn't praying. She was waiting for someone to do the math. And finally, someone did. From where I stood, I could still see Clara at her desk. Low profile, head slightly down, fingers typing with steady rhythm. She didn't look up, not yet. But her posture had shifted. There was purpose in her stillness. She wasn't laughing like the others. Wasn't scrolling or filming or exchanging those glances people pass around like cigarettes, meant to burn, not to share warmth. She stared at her screen longer than needed for a regular check. Then something changed. A subtle tilt of her chin, her brows tightening just a fraction. Whatever she'd pulled up, it wasn't standard. I saw it in her face. She knew. There was a power in that. A quiet one. Not the kind that demands a microphone, but the kind that knows how to hold silence like a loaded gun. Clara leaned back slightly, eyes still on the screen. Her mouth moved, but barely. Not talking, reading, confirming, cross-referencing. And then she froze. Her lips parted for half a second before she caught herself and glanced up, straight at me. We held eye contact. She didn't nod, didn't signal anything, but I felt the shift. Somewhere between the lines of her expression, between the knowledge and disbelief, something had clicked. I turned away before it could linger too long. I didn't want her to draw attention. Not yet. Instead, I took a few slow steps toward the back wall of the lobby. The chatter behind me faded as my focus narrowed. Past the row of teller counters, behind the gold-accented rope barriers, stood a floor-to-ceiling panel of dark marble. At its center, in embossed lettering, was the mission statement of Regent Crest Bank. To serve with excellence, to lead with integrity, to honor our foundation. I used to believe that. In the beginning, when we were choosing paint swatches and debating font families, those words had meant something. They weren't just for press releases or social media banners. They were a promise, a covenant. At least, they were to me. I reached out and let my fingers brush the corner of the steel crest mounted beside the panel, a logo I had designed. A simple arc intersecting a crest, meant to symbolize growth, resilience, and continuity. Now it just looked like branding. But back then, it had come from something real. A sketch on a napkin during a sleepless night, drawn by someone who believed in the kind of place this could be. Someone they'd all decided didn't belong anymore. Behind me, another notification sound chirped. Monette again, probably reacting to a fresh flood of comments. Her voice was softer now, less performative. Maybe the energy in the room had changed, even if they didn't realize it yet. I didn't move. I just stood there, palm pressed to the stone, not out of nostalgia, but to reclaim something that had always been mine. That's when Clara moved. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't make an announcement. She simply clicked one final key, waited, and then reached into a drawer. She pulled out a single printed sheet, folded it once, and tucked it into her blazer. Then she stood. Her eyes scanned the room, not in panic, but in awareness. And then she walked. Not toward me, not toward Darla, but toward the hallway just past the teller booths, where the private offices were. She passed Monette, past the guards, past the line of people still holding their phones and their judgments, and no one stopped her. Clara disappeared down the corridor, and for the first time since this started, I felt it. Momentum. It wasn't big yet, not loud, but it was real, and it was mine. A man 2 seats away cleared his throat. The woman in red who'd laughed earlier pretended to check her watch. No one was filming anymore. I took another look around, just a glance, and stepped aside from the crest, letting my hand fall. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even embarrassed anymore. I was awake, and somewhere, beneath all the noise and cruelty, someone else finally was too. Because silence says more than screaming when the person you dismissed turns out to own the floor you're standing on. I didn't hear Clara speak, but I saw her pause at the edge of the hallway. She slipped through the glass door like she belonged there. The moment passed quickly, nothing dramatic. But the energy in the room had shifted. And so had Vince. He'd been leaning near the front entrance this whole time, just out of frame, invisible in the way older men in uniform often are, until they're not. I saw him glance at me, then at Darla, then at the teller line, and the thin tension still hanging in the air like static. He didn't say anything to anyone. He just turned his body, walked toward the hallway opposite Clara's path, and disappeared through the staff-only exit. No one paid attention. I did. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 12. By then, the lobby had gone strangely quiet. Phones lowered. People started shifting in their seats, unsure whether they were still supposed to be laughing or waiting for the next act. Monette was still scrolling, but she'd stopped narrating. Even Darla was no longer pretending to look at her tablet. And then, like it had all been scripted, the glass front doors opened. No dramatic music, no booming voice, just a man in a gray suit, no tie. Dark dress shoes, not shined to perfection, but clean and firm against the marble. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look curious. He looked like he belonged. Leonard. He stepped into the lobby, calm as the morning sky, and for a second, just a second, everything stopped. I could feel it before I even turned. People noticed. Heads turned, mouths parted slightly. Someone murmured behind me, "Isn't that the guy from Duxford Holdings?" Another voice replied, "That's her husband." Darla's head snapped toward the entrance. Her face drained like someone had pulled the plug from the back of her neck. Leonard didn't address her. He didn't look at anyone. He just walked straight past the seating area, past the teller line, until he stood beside me. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't demand answers. He looked at me and said, quietly, directly, no pity in his voice, "Are you okay?" I looked at him, nodded once. That was enough. Then he turned, to the manager at the front counter. "To whom it may concern," he said evenly, "I'm initiating a full withdrawal. all personal, business, and trust holdings under my name, my companies, and our family foundations. The manager stuttered. Sir, do you mean now? Leonard nodded. Now? Darla blinked, stepped forward. Leonard, I think you're overreacting. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look at her. I'm not reacting, he said. I'm responding. You allowed them to mock my wife in a space she helped build. That's not something I overlook. That's something I fix. Darla's mouth opened again, but no words came out. The manager fumbled with his screen, clicking, typing. The weight of what was happening had finally begun to land. Someone in the lobby gasped. Not loudly, but enough to be heard. Monette dropped her phone in her lap. A woman who'd made the donation jar comment earlier stood and slowly backed away from the center of the room. Leonard reached into his inside pocket, pulled out a sleek black card, and placed it on the counter. Process it, he said. The manager reached for it with shaky hands, and then Clara returned. She didn't say anything either. She stepped up beside Leonard, unfolded the printed document from earlier, and placed it carefully next to the card. An account summary, not just for Leonard, but for me. My name, Lelia Tate Duxford, sat clearly at the top of the page. The total? Large enough to give anyone in the room heartburn. Leonard didn't even glance at it. He'd seen it before. This wasn't about proving anything to him. It was about proving it to everyone else. You'll need to close every associated ledger by noon, he said. Not cruel, not loud, just final. Darla took a step back. She wasn't smirking now. She wasn't anything. She was quiet. The same kind of quiet the rest of the room had fallen into. Not out of respect, out of recognition. The people who had laughed, whispered, recorded, and posted now watched without a sound. The shift was complete, and I didn't need to say a word. Only this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet about it. Darla had always been good at walking that razor-thin line between cruelty and plausible deniability. In our childhood, she would say something hurtful and follow it with a sweet smile, daring you to challenge her in front of others. At the Thanksgiving table, in parent-teacher meetings, at our mother's retirement party, it was always the same dance. She'd say it wasn't personal, and that made it worse. But today, she crossed that line with both heels and no intention of looking back. Leonard turned to her, his calm still intact. So tell me, Darla, was it personal? Her face twitched. Not in panic, not yet, but in recognition. Like she knew the moment of exposure had finally arrived. You don't have to do this, Leo, she said, reaching for control like it was still somewhere within arm's length. You're making it personal. He didn't answer, not right away. Instead, he looked at me. I felt the weight of his gaze, but more than that, I felt the permission. For the first time, he wasn't protecting me. He was making space for me to speak for myself. It wasn't personal, I said, and I didn't raise my voice. But she made it that way. A long time ago. Darla blinked. Her mouth moved to speak, but nothing came. There are some truths that don't need volume. They just need air. I turned to the room. Not just her. Everyone. Even the ones who had looked away. Especially them. She almost lost her job 7 years ago, I said. Internal audit flagged a misappropriation of client funds, $38,000, moved from a dormant account into an off-books escrow shell she couldn't explain. I could feel them listening now, every breath behind me held still. She would have been terminated, I continued, but someone filed a sealed affidavit, testifying the transfer was an internal misunderstanding. The audit froze. She kept her title. I glanced back at Darla. I signed that affidavit, I said. Me! The room cracked with gasps. Quiet ones, controlled, but gasps all the same. Darla stepped forward, her voice high, too quick. That was years ago. I was new to management. I was trying to navigate things without the... You were reckless, I said, interrupting her before the revisionist script took hold. You were drowning, and I handed you the only rope I had. I didn't do it for applause. I didn't even tell Leonard. Leonard remained still. He already knew. The surprise on his face had come and gone years ago when I'd finally explained it to him over dinner one rainy night. But you knew, I said to Darla. You knew the truth. And you chose to stand here, in front of these people, and act like I was nothing. Her hands clenched. I didn't know you'd show up today, she said, quieter. I didn't know you'd still care. My voice didn't waver. You didn't know I'd remember. The silence in the lobby thickened. I felt Clara move again. She walked forward, not fast, not hesitant, just steady. In her hands, a document sleeve. She opened it carefully, removed a photocopy of the original affidavit I'd signed. She didn't speak. She placed it on the counter beside the black card Leonard had laid down minutes earlier. That gesture, the simple placement of truth, rang louder than anything said that morning. A man near the velvet rope shifted his stance, eyes now cast downward. The woman who'd mocked my tote earlier started fiddling with her necklace chain. Monette opened her phone, but the screen stayed dim. Her live stream had ended, and she didn't dare start another. I looked back at Darla. You asked if I still cared, I said. What I care about is clarity. What I care about is memory. Darla's eyes glistened, not with tears, with calculation. She was scanning the exits, not the physical ones, but the narrative ones, trying to find a story she could still spin. There were none. Clara finally spoke. I found the original account logs, she said softly. Her name's listed under a legacy tier, founder level. You don't get there by mistake. Darla didn't respond. Leonard crossed his arms, said nothing. He didn't need to, because I had already said enough. And the room, the one that once laughed, now it remembered something it had chosen to forget. I took one step forward, closer to Darla. Close enough that she didn't have to pretend we weren't sisters. You showed them who you are today, I said. And then Leonard turned to me, his voice low. What do you want to do next? I didn't pause. Nothing more, I replied. She's already shown them who she is. They just watched. Like they finally understood they never really saw me. I didn't wait for anyone to speak. I walked to the far end of the counter, away from the noise, away from Darla's silence and Monette's downcast gaze. A strange kind of stillness had settled over the room, like whatever had filled the air all morning. Judgment, cruelty, smug amusement had finally collapsed under its own weight. Behind me, Clara moved with a purpose that didn't need permission. She stepped behind the teller counter, pulled a presentation tablet from a locked drawer, and without a word, connected it to the bank's overhead display. The large digital screen flickered once, then twice, before settling into a dark navy blue background. She tapped quickly through a few folders, stopped, and opened one labeled Founding History, Internal Use Only. I didn't know she had access to that. When the document loaded, the silence cracked. There, in bold white lettering across the center of the screen, it read, Lealia Tate, Strategic Co-Founder, Original Land Deed, Signatory. Gasps, actual, audible gasps, rippled through the room like a low wave. Someone, maybe the man in the gray blazer, who'd laughed earlier, whispered to himself, Wait, she helped build this? Clara stood to the side, hands folded in front of her. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. I heard a ceramic cup shatter softly. A woman, client, upper 40s, tailored dress and pearls, had dropped her espresso. It dripped down the counter, pooling near a stack of financial brochures. Nobody moved to clean it. Then came the video. Clara swiped to another folder and opened the internal feed. A screen-in-screen combination of two clips. One was the live security camera from earlier. The other, Monette's live stream. The moment Darla leaned in and called me a fake beggar, the room stilled further. The words, her words, played again on the screen above us all. Captions auto-generated below the video. This bank doesn't serve imposters. The same lobby that had erupted in soft chuckles and half-hidden grins 2 hours ago now sat frozen beneath the weight of their own complicity. The screen zoomed out again. Clara tapped once more, bringing up a scanned image, a legal document bearing two signatures. One was Leonard's, the other was mine. The deed to the land where this building sat. My name, written in my own hand, unmistakable, Lealia Tate Duxford. Leonard walked toward the screen, not quickly, but with the quiet confidence that made people get out of his way without him asking. He took a hard copy from his briefcase. The same deed, placed it in front of the manager, beside the account summary. No words. Then he turned and stood beside me. I stepped forward, finally speaking, not to the crowd, not to Darla, but to the space between us. "You were right," I said. "I didn't look like I belonged here today." The words hung in the air, just long enough for someone to mistake them for concession. But that's only because none of you ever looked close enough. I didn't raise my voice, didn't point or scold. I just spoke the truth and let it rest on their shoulders. Vince stepped forward, his hands clasped in front of him like a man standing in front of a grave. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I didn't know." He meant it. I gave him a small nod. That's the thing about assumptions. They feel like facts until they're proven wrong. The woman who had compared me to a janitor earlier looked down at her heels. Monette still hadn't picked up her phone. Darla stood off to the side, pale and silent, her arms wrapped around herself like she'd just realized how cold the room really was. Leonard didn't look at her when he spoke next. "This is your last day under my name," he said. His voice was low, measured. "After today, your employment ends." Darla's lips parted, but she didn't form words. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. Not yet. And I didn't look at her either. I turned toward the door instead. The same door they had nearly shoved me through not even an hour earlier. This time, nobody tried to stop me. They just watched. Like they finally understood they never really saw me. I walked with purpose, not defiance, not bitterness, but certainty. Each step toward the glass doors felt like a small, deliberate reclaiming of space that had once been mine. My heels didn't echo sharply across the marble floor the way Darla's always had. Mine made no statement. They simply carried me out. Nobody said a word. Vince stepped to the side without hesitation, holding the door open with the quiet dignity of a man who knew he'd stood on the wrong side of something, but wanted to do one thing right before the end of the day. I didn't thank him aloud, but I nodded. Once. That was enough. Monette shifted in her chair, adjusting her purse like it weighed more than it did. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her phone, dark now, sat forgotten on her lap. Not a single one of her followers could help her explain what had just happened here. A few clients lowered their eyes when I passed, the way people do when they recognize shame in someone else, but aren't ready to acknowledge it in themselves. The doors opened, and I paused. Not for dramatic effect, but because I wanted to choose my moment. This time, I would leave on my own terms. I turned, not to the people, not to Darla, but to the building, to the walls. The floor I had once helped lay, the branch I had helped open, the crest I had designed. I let my palm rest on the edge of the door, cool, polished glass, before I spoke. "Next time someone walks in asking for $400, I said, voice low but steady, "don't check their shoes, check your memory." I let that settle. Then, one last breath. One final note for the ones still pretending. "And for the record, I never cleaned your floors. I designed them." No gasps this time, just stillness. And that silence? That was the real sound of dignity. I stepped outside. The sun was high now, not quite noon. The breeze hit my face the way a gentle truth does. Familiar, never forced. Leonard joined me moments later. He didn't say anything right away. Just stood beside me, one hand in his pocket, the other lightly touching my back. Not to lead, not to comfort, just to let me know he was there. The car door opened. Vince had already radioed ahead. Of course he had. But I didn't get in right away. Instead, I looked back one last time. Not at the people, not at my sister, at the glass facade of the bank. The reflection staring back at me wasn't proud. It wasn't vengeful. It was done. Not broken, not bruised. Just done. My thoughts wandered. To the first blueprint I reviewed for this branch. To the late nights drafting projections while Darla went to mixers and networking brunches. She always hated numbers, but she liked credit. I remembered her, once, younger, smiling in her office the day I handed her the founding paperwork to sign. Her name in second position, mine in first. She didn't thank me then. She wouldn't now. But that's the thing about giving. You do it because it's in you, not because it's ever guaranteed to be returned. Leonard's voice broke the moment gently. "Where to now?" he asked, his tone light but respectful. I didn't answer right away. I let my eyes drift across the street. There was a small cafe, one I'd walked past a dozen times but never entered. A place that smelled like citrus and new beginnings. "Somewhere I don't have to prove I exist," I said. The door shut behind me with a soft, hydraulic sigh, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen, not by them, but by myself. 3 days passed without fanfare. No reporters camped on our lawn, no dramatic confrontations, just a quiet kind of ripple that kept moving, even after we'd left the building behind. Leonard spent most of that time on calls. Lawyers, foundation boards, private financial teams handling the fallout from his decision. I didn't ask for updates. I didn't need them, because something bigger was happening out there, and I didn't have to control it for it to be real. It started online, as things always do now. The video Monette had posted, the one meant to humiliate me, was reshared, recaptioned, recontextualized. Only now it was called, "They Mocked the Co-Founder." It wasn't just the views, though those came quickly. Over 1 million in under 72 hours. It was the comments, thousands of them, some confused, some furious, and some just quiet gratitude. This woman is grace in a war zone. Proof that being silent doesn't mean being weak. I've worked in corporate America 30 years. I've seen this happen in 100 different lobbies. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Sometimes the world gets the lesson without the teacher standing at the front of the room. Regent Crest issued a press release by the second morning. Effective immediately, Ms. Darla Whitcomb is no longer employed by Regent Crest Private Banking. We are conducting an internal review of past conduct. They didn't say my name. They didn't have to, because the internet already had. By the end of the week, an anonymous Reddit post surfaced. It linked back to a whistleblower complaint from years ago, one that had gone mysteriously unresolved. Users connected the dots faster than any journalist ever could. Screenshots, file archives, a 6-year-old audit trail that traced directly to Darla's desk. By the time the actual story broke in a mid-sized finance blog, her name was already trending, but not for the reasons she used to brag about. The ripple reached deeper. People in her orbit, the board members she'd courted, the women she'd lunched with, the charities she'd smiled for, went silent. One by one, they stopped returning her calls. Monette unfollowed her on every platform, erased every photo they'd taken together at galas and golf fundraisers. No public outrage, just disappearance. And that, in some ways, was the sharpest wound. But none of it came from me, because I had already left. On the third afternoon, I sat in our garden. Leonard was reading a book across from me, his feet stretched out, one hand holding a cup of tea. I was kneeling beside the bonsai, pruning gently. That little tree had taken years to shape, not into what I wanted, but into what it was always meant to be. He glanced up. "You could have burned the whole thing down." I didn't look at him. They burned themselves. I just stopped shielding them from the spark. His mouth curved at the edge, not quite a smile. More like an acknowledgement. We didn't need to say more. That evening, after he went inside, I opened a drawer in the hallway I hadn't touched in months. Inside was a letter, written years ago. The ink had faded in some places, the folds soft from being opened and closed so many times. I had written it the week after Darla's audit scandal. I never mailed it. It read, "I don't need you to thank me. I just need you to stop pretending I never stood behind you. I covered your mistake because I still believed you could rise above it. But I can't carry the weight of someone who insists on pretending they were never helped." I read it once more, then carried it to the backyard. I didn't shred it. I didn't bury it. I lit a single match and watched the edges curl and blacken in the fire pit. There was no rage in it, no ceremony, just letting go. That's the thing about some scars. They don't scream. They just glow, quietly, reminding you of what you've survived. Later that night, I sat in bed, the window open beside me, the wind slipping in like a quiet song. I whispered a thank you, not to anyone in particular, just for the peace, not the kind that's given to you, the kind you choose to take back.